When the sky finally opened up, they had already made the Atlantic. Below them was the country of Newfoundland. But they were 3 hours behind schedule and they were in trouble. Frantically, they followed the coast south, trying to get a critical navigation bearing that would send them safely skyward for New York.
It was 1927, and two of France's most daring flying aces were trying to beat Charles Lindbergh to New York. Well, they disappeared without a trace. That is until now. New evidence shows there's a very good chance those two airmen could be lying in a pond somewhere on the southern Avalon.
Tonight, we'll tell you why. Why there's an excellent chance this is the place where the last flight of l'Oiseau Blanc ended. In 1927, those daring young men and their flying machines had captured the attention of the world. The war to end all wars had created a whole new generation of hero, the flying ace. They had become the heroes, and in France, watching their aces perform daring feats among the clouds was a national obsession. Two of their biggest stars were Charles Nungesser and Francois Coli. Nungesser was a daring pilot whose skill in the air over France brought him even greater notoriety on the ground. Francois Coli was known as the One-Eyed Devil. His eye lost to the war, he was fearless and considered to be one of the best navigators in Europe. And the race was on. From Paris to New York, one way or the other, direct non-stop. The first to accomplish it picked up 25,000 American dollars. Nungesser and Coli, in partnership with the Labrador Aeroplane Company, were convinced they could beat the young American Charles Lindbergh and his Spirit of St. Louis. These two Frenchmen who mocked death were convinced they would be the first. Unlike their competitors, Nungesser and Coli would leave from Paris. Banking on a series of low-pressure systems, they would search a favorable wind that would carry them across the Atlantic and over the Statue of Liberty 2 weeks before the American Lindbergh got off the ground. Their plane, the White Bird, or l'Oiseau Blanc, was impressive. A powerful engine capable of over 500 horsepower drove the modified Labrador Navy aircraft. To save weight, they would drop their landing gear, landing instead on water using the plane's amphibious hull. Early in the morning of May 8, 1927, Nungesser and Coli took off. Heavily loaded with fuel and hopes, they crossed the English Channel and disappeared. Now, 66 years later, there are questions, and maybe the answers, lying in a remote pond deep in the barrens of the southern Avalon. For decades along the Cape shore, almost from the day the plane disappeared, there have been stories about a plane in Gull Pond. Stories that have become folklore. Back in 1927, there wasn't an aircraft to be found anywhere in the country of Newfoundland. Communications were poor and the Cape shore was very remote. Hearing or seeing a plane was unheard of, but people did. In the archives, reports of the sound of an airship passing. In Harbor Grace and in St. Mary's, another report, that of a white plane with some sort of smoke coming out of it, heading in over the southern Avalon, heading for the Gull Pond.
Yes, a gentleman by the name of Daly from St. Mary's was cutting wood up on a hill somewhere in St. Mary's area. And he heard the plane and he seen it, and he said there was what looked to him like a smoke coming out of it.
For years, Bill Roach of Branch has heard the stories too. So did his mother Mary. 86 now, she was a young woman in 1927. She remembers her cousin telling about 3 explosions up in the country the same time the White Bird disappeared.
Yeah. 3 explosions in the country he was trapping. I've heard about that, all right.
And what time of year was that?
Oh, that was in May, most likely, because that's the time for the trapping for the muskrat. And That was, he used to go right in the country, right down to Branch River.
At 81, another Cape Shore resident, Anthony McGraw, distinctly remembers hearing an airplane pass.
I heard it, and many more heard it. Over on the hill where I was born and reared, we thought the chimney was afire. So something new to all of us. We paid attention to it, listening.
A boy of 15 then, later he became a man of the sea and the woods. In his travels far back in the country, he remembers actually removing a piece of strange metal that was sticking out of the ice in Gull Pond.
A lot of sheet metal to it. A good work done on it, riveted.
And you took a piece out of the country, did you?
Yeah, I kept that one right there. That's the only way.
Yeah. And snapped it off.
I snap it off, yeah.
He hid it, but when he went back for it in the fall, it was gone. Someone had stolen it. The stories are enough to convince Bill Roach there are 2 French flying aces somewhere up in Gull Pond.
I've known these people all my life, and all credible people. If they said it happened, in my mind, it happened, you know.
So you think there's a good chance there's 2 Frenchmen lying out there somewhere?
Yes, I'm convinced of it.
Located at the headwaters of the Branch River, this barren, would-be landing strip of water is remote.
There's not a deep pond. 6 feet, I never found any more than a fathom of water in it anywhere.
Hubert McGraw of Patrick's Cove heard all the stories too. For years he's been drawn to Gull Pond by the tales told around the kitchen stove.
From the earliest days in my home, this was talked about by my father and by other men who would be in the house at a particular time, and conversations would be on the country, and it was common not only in my home but all the homes of the community where men went back in the country.
When did you start to put 2 and 2 together?
I never heard my father or any of the men from the community ever refer to Nungesser and Coli. I suspect they didn't know of the transatlantic flights and the implications that it might have for the country.
His father didn't know it, but there was a frantic search going on for the French flyers. The world wanted to know what had happened to France's heroes. Where was their plane? Searchers found no trace. The French blamed the Americans for giving Nungesser and Coli the wrong weather forecast. As far as the world was concerned, they had simply flown off the face of the earth.
Amazingly, all the stories told about the plane in the pond remain just that, stories told along the Cape Shore. In almost 70 years, there have never been any official reports or investigations at all. Some of the sightings were documented. Airships were sent from New York to search the entire country. But the secret of Gull Pond was never revealed. Well, you had your work cut out for you dragging that all the way back in this country.
Oh, well, it took a while, you know, but...
It's all right, though, to get out of the weather.
Yes, it's been a lot of...
In 1970, curiosity finally got the better of Hubert McGraw. He built a small cabin near the pond and started to search. But decades of decay had done its work. Weeks of searching with friends turned up one piece of metal. A piece of metal that soon disappeared again.
What happened to the piece? My friend was using a new face mask that day, and he had it's as vivid as if it were yesterday. He had this empty box that he had taken a new diving mask out of, and when my cousin had cleaned up the piece and taken all the silk off it, he very carefully put it in that diving box. Charlie brought it home with him, brought it to his house in St. Bride's, and when he left the area the next year, all we can assume is that the piece of metal went out with whatever garbage he didn't take with him at the time and whatnot.
So
it got thrown out.
In all, no less than 4 pieces of metal, which everyone thought came from an airplane, surfaced. Each time something happened. Anthony McGraw had his stolen. Hubert McGraw had his piece thrown in the garbage. 2 more pieces surfaced, but each time they were lost when the buildings they were in burned to the ground. Now, after 66 years, it looks like this is a mystery that's about to be solved.
And here is the reason why. This little chunk of low-carbon steel pulled from the pond last October. It doesn't look like much, but it's a critical piece of evidence. It's the one solid link between the White Bird and Gull Pond.
Move it over 10 degrees to right.
It was found by these people who call themselves the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, or TIGER for short. Using the latest survey technology and metal detection equipment, TIGER recovered the piece near a small island in the middle of the pond, the same pond of Cape Shore legend. Team leader Richard Gillespie knows finding the White Bird would be a significant historical achievement.
Nungesser and Coli occupy a very significant place in the hearts of the French people, just as the other vanished aviators are important to those who remember them. So whatever may be there may solve some important questions.
TIGER was so attracted by the stories along the Cape Shore, they decided to do a preliminary survey, and they struck pay dirt.
It's a carbon steel, low carbon steel, no exotic ingredients in it, so it could be quite old. It certainly has the appearance of being very old. It has paint on its surface that appears to be a light blue colored paint.
Is it a piece of the White Bird? It's hard to tell. The White Bird was named for its color, so the blue paint is a problem.
The metal there is the wrong color for the White Bird. It's traditionally blue painted, so that's a problem.
But is it? In a museum in France, there's one more critical piece of evidence: the landing gear from the White Bird, which was dropped on the airfield near Paris. On display at Le Musée de l'Air et de l'Espace, it clearly shows a light blue paint was part of the trim. So the White Bird was not entirely white. And when pressed, Gillespie admits he knows there was blue paint on the White Bird.
If it turns out to be identical paint, it won't be conclusive, but it'll be an interesting piece of information to have.
So there was no blue paint on the White Bird?
Well, we don't know that. There are portions of the landing gear that is painted blue.
In fact, Gillespie and his group are so excited about the connection, they've made it their top priority. Under a shroud of secrecy, they came back to Newfoundland last month to prepare for a major expedition in the spring. In their newsletters, they're telling group members the evidence is so strong, they are as good as convinced the White Bird crashed in the pond. When you put it all together, the stories, documented evidence, and pieces of metal, here's the best guess about the fate of the White Bird. Early on May 9, 1927, the White Bird hits the coast of Newfoundland, off schedule and off course. Nungesser and Coli head south, passing Harbor Grace, trying to get a bearing. Over St. Mary's Bay, trouble, probably with the engine's cooling system, will force them down. With steam hissing and their engine failing, they look for somewhere to land. The water in the bay is too rough, so they head in over the barrens. They spot the pond. It's spring and the water is high. Too high, perhaps, to reveal the pile of stone which constitutes an island in the middle. They touch down only to realize too late and pile into the rocks just below the surface. 3 tanks of gasoline crash into the hot engine, and the White Bird is blown to bits. The white plane sighted with smoke coming out of it, the explosions in the backcountry, the small pieces of metal hidden in the pond's bottom all start to make sense. That's what the TIGER organization believes, but try getting them to say it.
Do you think that's the plane?
Do I think what's the plane?
Do you think the debris that's lying in that plane, in that pond, belonged to the Nungesser Coli expedition?
My opinion at this point is that of the various missing aircraft, there is reason to suspect that the White Bird could have landed there.
And Gillespie, choosing his words carefully, also admits he suspects his group will prove its theory next spring with a full-scale, high-tech search of the pond. Hubert McGraw does more than suspect. He's convinced.
I do a lot of hunting back in that country. I hunt alone, and I've been back there a good many days on my own. And as I've walked around that pond, I've always had something in the back of my head that said there's 2 men here, and it's an eerie feeling. And I'd certainly like somebody to, I'd be very happy if somebody would answer the question, yes.
Not much of a place to come to an end, though, is it?
No, and you know, looking at the time of year back in May, not unlike it is today, I would imagine, you know.
For Hubert McGraw, it's more than just a question of solving the mystery. It's a question of Newfoundland heritage, of his own folklore, and he's sure it will change the way history is written.
It's hard to imagine that 2 world explorers from France may be out there somewhere.
Yeah, it is. It's difficult to imagine, but you know, there's been enough said to me about it, and I've heard enough about it, and the fact that they haven't been found, even though there are other places that have been touted as possible places for a landing for them, this is as good as anywhere that has been mentioned. It could very well be the place. Yeah. There's something to it. There's something to it.
I'm Reg Sherren.